Hi, I'm Danny.
Hi, I'm Mel, and we're the Sheehan sisters. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a movie that Danny and I recently watched. It's called It's What's Inside on Netflix. It's a psychological thriller. This movie has so many elements and layers to it. It was a roller coaster of a movie, and I had to pause and rewind multiple times.
I agree. The movie is confusing and very trippy. I'll give a small synopsis before we dive into our commentary. The movie is about a group of 8 friends who get together for a reunion right before one of the friends is going to get married. And these characters haven't seen each other since college. So the 8 characters are Shelby, Cyrus, Brooke, Nikki, Ruben, Maya, Dennis, and Forbes. So right off the bat, they allude to some sort of issue in the past with Forbes, so they're not sure if he'll end up showing up to the reunion. Ultimately, he does, and he brings along this suitcase that holds a device which ultimately will cause all the chaos. Mel, do you want to share with them what this device ends up doing?
Yes, and if we didn't say it yet, there are spoilers ahead. So stop right now, go watch the movie, take some time to process it, and then come back to this video.
Yes. We're still processing it.
We had a whole debriefing before even filming this video. I'm like, wait, what was that? And then what did, and then, yeah, we're still, yeah. We're still trying to figure it out. And let me tell you what the device did so you guys can understand why the movie was so confusing. The device inside the suitcase allowed for all of them to switch bodies with one another. So their consciousness was going into the other's bodies. And they decided to play a game that they would use the device, switch bodies, and then they had to guess who was in whose body.
I was surprised that they all were willing to switch. Ultimately, Shelby was the only one who had some sort of resistance to partaking, but her boyfriend did convince her to play the game. I just find it interesting that the rest of them were all like, yeah, let's do it. I don't know how I would feel about that.
Right, I agree kind of that it was weird that they were so willing to do it, but then again, I think the way that these movies work is usually it's a bunch of rich kids who already do a bunch of crazy things and they're just kind of like, well, all right, yeah, let's do it. I don't know, that's like the vibe I was getting. The cast was definitely giving me like Gossip Girl vibes, and not to say that anything in the movie is related to Gossip Girl, just like these rich kids who at least, you know, they come from some kind of money, they're living like fast lifestyles, they're also kind of free spirited, just down for whatever. And I do want to note that they were not sober, they were drinking and smoking, and it alluded to them maybe doing other things. But yeah, I think they were in a different mindset to be like, okay, yeah, let's do this.
I do think the movie did a good job at introducing the characters, and while we were watching the movie, Mel and I were both taking notes so that, well, A, so we don't forget what happened, and B, it did help keep track of what the hell was occurring in this film. So I wanted to pull up my initial thoughts of the characters. I wanted to share the archetypes that I thought each character portrayed. So Nikki is introduced as the social media star. She's our modern day influencer. Then we have Maya, who's the spiritual one. Then we have Forbes, who I considered the troublemaker, but looking back, I could see Dennis also being the troublemaker. Then we have our troubled couple, Shelby and Cyrus, who we're introduced to right off the bat, and they kind of set the tone of the movie, I would say. Do you agree, Mel?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that Dennis for me is more of like, I definitely see him as a troublemaker, but I see him also more as like the playboy type. And he's also one of the main rich kids.
Then we have Ruben, who is the one about to get married. They do mention his wife slightly, but she's not one of the main characters. But they do allude to him being in love with Maya. That is hinted at in the beginning of the film, and that will play an important part later on. And like Mel mentioned, I do see Dennis as the playboy rich kid. And Brooke, now that I think back at it, she was showing off her art at the dinner table. So she definitely is the artsy friend.
I agree. I think she's the artsy friend. I also kind of feel like she's the wild child. I don't know. That was my perception of her. I agree with the archetypes that Danny presented, and I think they become more prevalent as the themes of the movie start to unfold. And that's something that we wanted to discuss, is the different themes that we saw play throughout the movie.
Let me pull up my notes. So I did feel like identity is one of the overwhelming themes of the movie, which ties into today's societal pressure with social media. And I feel like we see that right away with Shelby. She starts the movie looking at Nikki's Instagram as well as her boyfriend, which becomes an issue later on in the movie. But it seems as though Shelby's comparing herself to Nikki, who has an overwhelming number of followers and likes and support. And there's even a scene where Shelby and Cyrus are driving to the reunion, and Shelby takes a photo and posts it on Instagram, and she gets 3 likes and then ends up deleting the post, which is a little too real for me.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite scenes. The whole layout of it was just summed up perfectly, of her scrolling through someone else's Instagram and then trying to like recreate the same kind of photo, or like the same kind of momentum of like, hey, look at me. I agree that one of the main themes is definitely identity, especially given the fact that they're all swapping bodies. So you're literally stepping into someone else's shoes, but you're still your same consciousness, so you don't really know what's going on in their mind. But so it does have a big superficial layer to it.
Right. And I think that's something Mel and I have battled with when it comes to being on social media or trying to get our art out there or our poetry out there, or even putting ourselves more out there, because we do have a lot of ideas. But when you don't get that reception or that engagement you're hoping for, it is very discouraging, especially when you're comparing yourself to other people who are receiving a lot of attention and engagement. It does make you feel less about yourself, which is unfortunate, but I think that was such a relatable element of the movie, and it plays into the plot later on when Shelby is transferred into Nikki's body.
Right, and one of the first things she does as Nikki is she goes and takes a selfie and she posts it, and she sees the instant gratification of getting over 1,000 likes. And it's funny, but it's also not funny at the same time. It's just funny that it's like the first thing she did inside that body was post to social media. But one of the themes that I had written down was insecurities, which I also think was a main theme of the movie. And Shelby is a very insecure person, because there's this added layer of, not only is Nikki a social media influencer, it's someone she knows and someone her boyfriend knows, and it's revealed later that it's someone her boyfriend was interested in and wanted to date before he started dating her. And like Danny was saying in the beginning scene, the boyfriend is also looking at Nikki's Instagram. But not only is he looking at Nikki's Instagram, he has other tabs open of explicit videos. Intimacy, I think, is another theme that is present because Shelby and Cyrus are having a lot of relationship issues revolving around insecurities, intimacy, him maybe longing for another woman and maybe her wanting to be that other woman.
I did feel for Shelby. It seems as though she's constantly comparing herself to Nikki, and like Mel mentioned, there was, I can't even say a past attraction because it seems like her boyfriend still is very much attracted to Nikki. And it seems as though Shelby's trying to emulate certain characteristics of Nikki so that not only she receives more gratification from her boyfriend, but also from the rest of the world because it seems to be working for Nikki. And like Mel was mentioning, there's that constant comparison, which is why when she got the opportunity to be in Nikki's body, she kind of got hypnotized by that power and that allure and magnetism, which does go to Shelby's head and ultimately causes her to hijack Nikki's body.
I think I interpreted the scene of Shelby trying to hijack Nikki's body differently. Guys, it does sound confusing because it is confusing because there's 8 characters and then they're swapping bodies, so you're trying to keep track of who's who and who's in whose body. The movie does do a good job of showing, they do like different lightings in the movie to show you who's actually in the body. But it's just confusing to try to talk about. But anyway, so Shelby is in Nikki's body. Her boyfriend Cyrus is in Forbes' body, and they're having this discussion, and basically she's trying to convince her boyfriend to go into someone else's body, and she stays in Nikki's body, and then they kind of live happily ever after in someone else's body. But I think that she was just testing him. That's what I think. I think she wanted to see how much he loved her, or like how much he really wanted to be with Nikki. That was like my interpretation of her trying to like hijack the body. I don't think she was really, I think she was doing it more for her relationship than for herself. What do you think?
I agree. I do feel like she was testing him and wanted to see if he would fight for like the true Shelby.
Right, and I think she even says a line in the movie where she's like, "You didn't want me in anybody," which was a very powerful statement because again, I think it does come back to insecurities and identity and loving yourself. And I think there are times where you're in a relationship and you feel like you're not good enough, and you feel like, well, does my partner even want me anymore? Am I even what they're attracted to? And then you start to maybe like change your hair and change your body and change different things about yourself, hoping that this person wants you, hoping that this person will want you if you change yourself. But that's why I really like the line where she's like, "You don't want me in anybody," because ultimately he didn't have love for Shelby's.
I think Mel perfectly described their dynamic. It seemed as though Shelby consistently felt like she was never good enough for Cyrus. And I know we're mostly focused in on Cyrus and Shelby, but we do want to get into more of the themes that we saw throughout the movie and explain a little bit more about the other characters. When they initially start the game, it is very lighthearted and they are having a lot of fun. They end up switching back to their original body, but they all enjoyed it so much that they want to do a second round and switch into another body, which is later mentioned by Forbes, who hints at the body switching becoming addictive, which I think ties into what Mel was saying, walking in other people's shoes and getting a taste of what it is, what it feels like to live as somebody else, especially if that means having their privilege, their money, their beauty.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm sorry, I was kind of like, I'm listening to you, but I'm also getting lost in thought about what you said, how it gets addicting. And I can definitely see that. Like, if this became a real life thing, which who knows in the future, maybe somebody out there is working on a device similar to this, because I feel like I would be a little interested to be like, what is it like to be someone else? I think most people possibly have had that thought occur in their mind, especially with social media and celebrities, where you see someone who seems to be living this perfect life because that's what they're posting, and you're like, look at this person on a new vacation every weekend. Like, I want that to be me. And look at this person with all this money and the looks and the superficial things that we think are going to bring us happiness. And another character I wanted to talk about, which you had mentioned earlier, was the groom to be, Ruben. And Danny had mentioned that he is in love with one of the characters, Maya, and that's why one of the themes I wrote down was longing. As we saw with Cyrus and Shelby, both kind of longing for Nikki in different ways, you see Ruben longing for Maya, which ultimately doesn't work out well for him. And Ruben ends up in the body of Dennis, who I mentioned would be like the playboy type. And Ruben's more of like the stand-up guy, he's about to get married. And it seems like out of the whole group, he's the first one to get married. So he's just like the stand-up, respectable guy. He's the one who hosted this reunion. He seems to be very charismatic and just like a good guy. I feel like that's his kind of archetype. And then there's Dennis, the bad boy, playboy kind of vibe. And when Ruben gets the chance to be in his body, I feel like he takes advantage of that and does things that he wouldn't normally do in his own body.
With Ruben in Dennis's body, it seems as though it gives him this boost of confidence to go after Maya. Well, Maya's body anyway, because at this point in time, Brooke is in Maya's body. And they're both outside on the balcony. And Ruben just makes his move. And with Brooke in Maya's body, it seemed like she was just going with the flow and just enjoying the night. So ultimately, they hook up. So just to recap, it's Dennis and Maya's body, but it's Ruben and Brooke inside the body. So Ruben has his own motives why he's doing what he's doing, and Brooke is just kind of like free-spirited wild child enjoying the night, which leads to an unfortunate accident which causes Dennis's and Maya's body to fall off the balcony, and they are unalived. But remember, it's Ruben and Brooke who pass away. Like Mel and I were saying, it does get very confusing, but ultimately now Dennis, who's in Cyrus's body at this time, and Maya, who's in Brooke's body at this time, have lost their bodies.
So now Dennis and Maya cannot return to their bodies, and now more chaos starts to ensue. Dennis is very angry, and he's inside Cyrus's body at this point in time. And he goes to check his bank account and realizes all his money's gone, and he blames Cyrus for stealing money from him. And then he goes and he calls the cops while he's in Cyrus's body and confesses to a crime that he didn't commit. He's ultimately blaming Cyrus for the deaths of Maya and Dennis. At this point in time, tensions are high. They're all kind of turning on each other. Forbes is acting weird, and Forbes is the one that brought the machine, so they want him to change everyone back. and he's acting super shady. He even tries to run away at one point, and he's also freaking out that the cops are now coming. And Shelby has also learned how to use the machine. So now Forbes and Shelby are the only two people that can potentially help them get back into their bodies. The night has just gone completely awry. What started as like a harmless, fun game between friends just became a crazy night. And even the ending was still super confusing, and everyone does not end up back in their bodies.
So because Forbes tries to run away, Nikki, who's in Brooke's body, knocks him out and they tie him up because they can't have him leaving with the device without switching everyone back. But like I mentioned earlier, this is the point in the movie where Shelby is in Nikki's body and she's refusing to leave Nikki's body. At this point, everyone starts turning on one another. It is revealed that Nikki is not as good of a person as she portrays herself to be online, which causes Shelby to threaten Nikki. And now Nikki doesn't trust Shelby, so she devises a plan with Dennis, while Shelby devises a plan with Forbes, which we believe is to put everyone back into their right body. But when they're all hooked back up to the device, they start arguing, and it causes Forbes to make some last minute changes.
So that scene ends with the police coming in, and then it cuts, and now it's the next day, the day of the wedding. And then a character that has been introduced but not shown yet is Forbes' sister Beatrice. So she shows up to the wedding, and it's kind of painted as a scene that the wedding has been canceled because, as we mentioned, Ruben, his consciousness is no longer with us. So Forbes and his sister meet, and it is revealed that Forbes has not been Forbes this entire time, and that Forbes is actually in his sister's body, and his sister had taken over his body. Forbes is in Beatrice's body and is confronting Forbes, but then he finds out that Dennis is in Forbes' body. So it's kind of left on like, wait, who's in whose body right now?
So now that Dennis is in Forbes' body, he explains to Beatrice, aka Forbes, stick with us here. He explains who is now in whose body. So it is revealed, which I didn't pick up on when I first watched it, but Mel showed me the scene again. But it is revealed that Nikki is now in Ruben's body. So it makes sense that Ruben, aka Nikki, never showed up for the wedding. So it looks like Shelby and Cyrus did end up back in their own bodies, which ends up being a problem for Cyrus. Because remember, when Dennis was in his body, he called the cops and pinned the deaths on Cyrus. So now Cyrus is in prison. And there's a scene where Shelby visits Cyrus in prison, but she's reluctant to help him get out by telling the police the truth of what really happened.
Right, which makes Cyrus question if Shelby is actually Shelby. And I think she is actually her, and I think that's a part of what we were talking about earlier of like identity and them really not knowing each other as a couple. So I feel like on her end, she felt like this maybe was like her kind of revenge to Cyrus. I think it was a bit extreme in my opinion for him to end up in jail, but none of his other so-called friends are even speaking up for him to become free either.
Initially, I wasn't convinced that Shelby was actually back in her own body. I just thought it was very extreme to leave that man in prison. Like, I understand she found out more about him and his attraction to Nikki. But like Mel was saying, I do think that is an extreme motive to keep him in prison for something he didn't actually do.
And then it is revealed that Forbes' sister Beatrice is now in Nikki's body and she has the suitcase. And that whole plot is something we didn't really bring up in this video because we mainly wanted to just touch on the themes that were happening in the movie.
Right, and it was revealed at some point throughout the movie that Beatrice was in Dennis's body at one point and lied about it, but that was her opportunity to transfer all of Dennis's money to an overseas account. So it seemed like Beatrice had developed a plan and had her own motives all along based off of some past events with that group. And looking back, Beatrice, who we thought was Forbes, was mentioning that it gets addictive to transfer to other bodies. So it seems like there's potential for more of the storyline to continue now that she's in Nikki's body. And now that she has Nikki's body and Dennis's money, the world is her oyster.
It really is, and I'm really hoping for a sequel to this movie. It hasn't been talked about. I feel like they left it on a cliffhanger of like a possible another movie maybe to happen, because I feel like there's so many things left unanswered, and I would love to see like where the characters go from there, because again, we know that Nikki's in Ruben's body, but they didn't really show her aftermath or like what's happening with that.
Right. I'm curious what Nikki's plan is now that she's in Ruben's body. Like, do you think that she could take her knowledge of social media and make Ruben an influencer? Would she still gain the same popularity and reception being in Ruben's body? I can see them going in many different directions if they did do a sequel.
Yeah, I can definitely see Nikki still trying to become an influencer. I mean, she's still in an attractive body, but I do think there is irony behind her ending up in a black man's body, because now she's a different gender, race. Her whole life has just been turned upside down.
And we don't know if Beatrice will ultimately body swap again. It seems likely that she would, considering that it's something she's addicted to. So who knows who will end up getting Nikki's body. But that is the movie in a nutshell, I suppose. I know it can be very difficult to keep up, especially with commentary on the movie. Watch it for yourselves. Let us know what you think.
Yes, I highly recommend you guys go and watch it. I'm giving that movie a 9 out of 10.
I'm not sure what my rating would be. I do feel like they could have strengthened and sharpened the underlying plot and motives behind the characters. But I love the idea of body swapping and being stuck in someone else's body. It creeps me out, but I thought that was such a cool concept.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.